Hello again. It is the end of February, which means once again it's time for me to ramble about books for way too long. So I'm always happy about that. This was a good month for me. I read 13 books this month, so one more than last month. I'm very impressed. I think I read worse books this month. I definitely did not like what I read nearly as much as I did last year. But at the same time, I had a couple books in here that I thought were better, very good. But that's what we're here to talk about. And I'll start with one of those books that I thought was better. It was the first book I finished this month, so it was a great way to start the month. It was True Grit by Charles Portis. I adored this book. I loved this book so much. It had funny, it had character, it had action. I don't like to use the word, but American classic, truly. Great book. I love it. I want to buy everything else Charles Portis has written now because this was just so good. I gave this a 5 star, which is pretty hard for me to do. Great book. And then sadly after that, I read two stinkers back to back. First, I read Death Trooper by Joe Schreiber, sorry, and I actually hated this book. Like it had some interesting ideas, and there were definitely scenes that I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." But the problem with this book, in my opinion, was, and this is spoiler, so I apologize, but why were Han and Chewie here? Did you have so little confidence in yourself that you couldn't write a Star Wars book without Han and Chewie being there? They added nothing. I don't know. It's probably a stupid nitpick from a stupid nerd, but like I did not like the fact that Han and Chewie were there at all. It was fine. It was a fine book. It had some cool zombie action, but like Han and Chewie did not. No, we didn't need them. Definitely a superfluous addition and only there for bait essentially. Like they did so little. And then we read The Beast Within. I I hate these Disney villainous books. I bought a bunch of them on a humble bundle like 2 years ago, so I've just been slowly picking at them because I'm too stubborn to say I did waste my money and I don't want to keep reading them, but because most of them are fairly short. But God, they're so pointless. It's just a retelling of the book, of the movie, from the villain's perspective most of the time, and they had nothing. I get it. They're for young kids or Disney adults or whatever, and I am luckily neither of those things, but they're just so boring. They're not bad, so they're not entertaining, but they're not good, so they're not entertaining. But whatever. I'm sure I'll have more gripes with them throughout the months because, like I said, I'm too stubborn to just say I'm not reading these. And then we read The Dragon Reborn, the third Wheel of Time book. I really, 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 really liked this one. This was, I think, way better than the first two. It felt a lot faster. There was a lot more action. We didn't have as much Rand in it, which I really like. This was a Perrin book, and I'm big team Perrin. This was also a Matt book. I like Matt and Perrin a lot more than I like Rand. So I was very happy to read all of this and read all this cool Perrin stuff going on. I like this one a lot. I'm actually in the middle of the fourth one right now. Well, past the middle, and that'll probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, be the first book I read, finish in March. But I still think I like this one better. This one was very good. Very, very, very good. And then we read The Dark Star That Shines for You Alone by Nissi Oysen, my boy, my favorite man. This was the first book of the Pretty Boy Detective Club. It was very quintessential Nissi Oysen. It had his weird sense of humor. The mystery was barely a mystery, but that's fine. It just felt very, again, Nissi Oysen, which I liked. I know some people, he's an acquired taste, I'll be the first to admit. But I liked this one. I thought this was really funny, really good. I liked all the characters, even the one character that they constantly call a lolicon and bully. But the problem with this book is that apparently there's like 13 of them or something, and only the first 3 have ever been translated into English, which is big sad. And speaking of the first 3, then I read the second one, The Swindler, The Vanishing Man, and The Pretty Boys. I don't think this one was any better or any worse than the first one. It was just different. Again, it's Pretty Boy Detective Club. What do you want me to say? The first one and the second one were essentially the same levels of quality, in my opinion. Then after that, I had a really boring day, so I read The Unbalancing by R.B. Lemberg, a nice short little, LGBTQ fantasy. I thought it was cool. It was a really interesting world. I know there's a couple more books in this Birdverse, or it is called the Birdverse, but I know there's a couple more books, at least two, which I do want to check out eventually because it was a very interesting world and good book. Nice little. It was pretty short, so it was a nice little one day read. And then we read the third Pretty Boy novel, The Pretty Boy in the Attic. I thought this was probably the best of the three that we have in English. The mystery was actually interesting. There was some cool stuff going on. If you're going to read any of them, read this one because you really don't need to read the other ones to understand what's happening. Like, there's some references and you'll probably be confused a little bit, but the main arc of the story is fairly self-contained. Then, after that, I literally tortured myself and I read The Poppy War in one day, all almost 600 pages. I read this whole book in one day and my eyes hated me. This book was really good. I've heard a lot of mixed things about this online, and I understand why, but I really like this. I like R.F. Kuang a lot. I read Babel 2 years ago. Yeah, 2022, I think. And I really liked Babel. I ate Babel up. So I'm reading this. I have a lot to say about this book, honestly. I might make a whole video about this book, because the first third of this book and then the last 2/3 are like two separate books. And I was honestly kind of felt ripped off at first, because the first part of this book is literally just Brandon Sanderson's King Killer in so many ways. But it shines by the end. It has a lot of its own identity, and it was really good. But don't do what I did. Don't read it all in one day. Never do what I do and read a book all in one day, because your eyes will hate you, and you'll probably not remember a lot of the story like I did. And then after that, we read A Hero Born by Jin Yong, the first book of the Legend of the Condor Hero, which is actually one book that was split into four for America. It's a Chinese wuxia novel, if you know what wuxia is, typical sword fantasy. I've never read a wuxia novel before, but I really liked it. It was cool. It had a surprising amount of comedy too, which I didn't expect. I do have the other three that I'm going to read eventually, but I really liked it. It shocked me. I did not think it was going to be as high quality as it was, because I kind of, just hearing the name wuxia and, hearing it described as like typical Chinese sword fantasy, I kind of expected it to be sort of, I don't know what the word I want to use is, pulpy maybe, I expected it to kind of just be like, haha, funny, like action from start to finish, not a lot of substance, but it was a really good book. It was very interesting. Very, very interesting. And then the last physical book I read this month is The Egyptian Cross Mystery by Ellery Queen, the famous, the widely talked about Ellery Queen. I love a good detective novel. This was a fair play detective novel, as they call it, so in theory, every clue is presented to you, and if you are an astute good boy who reads well, you can figure out who the murderer is before the book tells you. I did not do that. I never would have guessed who the murderer actually was until I got the clues at the end, but it was still good. It was a fun read. Some of these older detective novels can really slow to a grind, especially when they're like 300 pages plus like this one is, but I liked this. I felt like a lot was happening and very little of it was superfluous. This is why I hear a lot of people say this and like The Mystery of Why are the best Ellery Queen books, and this is the first one I've ever read, but I got to agree, this was very good. If you want a nice traditional detective story, good, you could do much worse than this. Much worse than this. And then the next book I read, this is a book I read in one sitting in one day. Do not do this. Don't be an idiot like me. It's The Spite House by Johnny Compton. I didn't love this book, but I also did not hate it. It wasn't, what do I want to say? It wasn't quite as visceral of a haunting, I guess, as I wanted. And I honestly feel like the fact that I read it in one day actually really diminished the book. Because, like, the main draw of the book to me at the beginning was the mystery. Like, they left so much unsaid, and they let you kind of piece things together as things go along. So if I had more days and more time, if I was reading it like 50 to 100 pages a day for 2 or 3 days, I could have let those mysteries marinate in my head and dwell on them and be like, oh, I wonder if this means this, or if the reason he did this thing was because of this. But because I read it all in one day, I really didn't get to sit and marinate with any of that. So I feel like the impact was kind of lost on me. But again, it wasn't bad. I just read it wrong, which is something you can do. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. And then finally, the last book I read this year, Unlucky Number 13, and it really was Unlucky Number 13. This was by far the worst book I've read this year so far, and probably one of the worst books I've finished in a long time. It was Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar, however you want to say it. I was really hoping this book was going to be like Terrifier for kids, you know, like, ooh, supernatural, spooky murder clown, booga booga booga, cool slasher kills and whatever. And really, it was just like stupid old generation versus young generation evil town. Like, I get it. It's a young adult book. I can't hold it to the same standards as, like, you know, something written for an actual adult person, and I am an adult person, so I should expect a young adult book to be not as good. And it's also my fault because I really didn't read the synopsis or anything. I just saw, ooh, Clown in a Cornfield. That sounds interesting, and there's two more, so obviously this first one can't be that bad, but God, did I hate this book. It was so on the nose. The kills were either like way too rushed or just, yeah, honestly, they were all just kind of way too rushed. None of them really sat with you and were like, whoa, that was really gruesome. It was kind of just like, this kid got murdered, this kid got murdered, this adult got murdered, like just one after another. It just, like I said, I came into this hoping Terrifier for kids, and I got Diet Children of the Corn, but it was Adult of the Corn. I don't know. Like I said, if I was probably like 15 years younger, I shouldn't have been reading it, but I probably would have liked it more. So that's where we are. February was a month with high highs and low lows, but 13, that's a good number. That means I'm at 25 books overall. My goal this year was 90. I really lowballed myself this year because I'm sure, knock on wood, that I will hit it. But we'll see. Like I said, right now I'm currently about 600 pages into the Fourth Wheel of Time book, which is super exciting. Because once I get over that, I'm sure I'll be able to read a lot more for March. But I'm also going to take March a little slower because I'm way ahead of my goal right now. I'm going to sit and marinate with books a little more, something I haven't done. I definitely didn't do in February. So yeah, keep reading, keep learning new things, and remember, you can read the wrong way. And by that I mean you can sit there and read the whole thing in one day. Enjoy.